Thank you.
Okay, I think we're going to start. I'm going to call the meeting to order on Wednesday, February 15th, 2023 at 3:03 p.m. We're going to do a roll call vote in order to ensure that we have a quorum. Nancy Crowley,
Here.
Liz Cobbs,
Here.
and Bill Morantia. So we do have a quorum of 3 individuals to satisfy the rules. Today's session is essentially intended to focus on the classification and compensation study. But before we get to the first agenda items, I do want to thank both Nancy and Liz for being able to take part of their day to come to a personnel board meeting. That's very appreciated. And we certainly want to thank the citizens who have, we have one here in attendance, and we have some on the Zoom for sharing your afternoon with us. I'd be interested to see how this matinee session goes. I went to a matinee at the Bradley Theater last week, and it was really pretty exciting, I have to say. Now, one thing they had there is they had popcorn with real butter. So I can't offer that to the people here, but matinee sessions actually are, as a kid, I can remember making certain I went to every matinee I could on the weekends. So putting that aside, I want to say before one other comment is that I did have a very constructive conversation with a local citizen who voiced their concern about process, about the timing, and about not having any document plan really to review. And the concern was that maybe we're not ready to move forward with any kind of thought given to at the town meeting. So then I think there are other comments that I've seen around town that also would suggest that this is something that is of concern, and we on the personnel board need to ensure that we factor that into whatever decisions we may have to make. So it's my understanding that in order for the personnel board to even get involved in a review or approval, that we have to have the town manager present to us something which they feel they would like to move forward to be able to have it reviewed and go through the process. That if we don't have that particular step, then we don't have anything to consider, and therefore there isn't any Article 5 that would be legitimately entertained. So that's my understanding, unless anybody else has a different take on this. Okay. So I think it's important that, and again, the idea was that we have a meeting in order to determine what is the status, what is happening. Now Kelly is not here, but I assume because the two of you have been working closely together day after day after week after week, then you can bring the personnel board and the citizens up to date with the status.
Sure. So what I thought might help for today is you've been asking for a timeline, more detailed timeline than what had been here before. And I thought, so we've been putting something that I can pull up on the screen to be working through as sort of a workshop and to talk about sort of how we've gotten here, what are the things that have been completed, and what would it take to get to town meeting. And that could, help you to assess whether you feel like those are reasonable steps, and have other people comment on that. Does that seem like a good approach?
Sure.
Okay. Right. So I'm going to. So, and this is the, oh, I'm gonna echo again. Somebody else has I'm on again. So this is a working document, and again, something to be refined. One of the things that you had talked about was seeing it more in a list with some timelines and target dates, as well as including some history. So we've been filling that in. We had some documents like that, but we've been filling that in. And so in this study, just to go quickly, I don't know that you want to go through every line of this, but I'm happy to if you'd like to. If you can review it more afterwards, whichever is helpful to you. But truly launched in August after an RFP process that we did go out for twice and did some revisions, and until you were involved in that process as the consultant was selected. And in August, there were preliminary conversations with the town, kind of set everything up. And we announced it to the employees. There were meetings with employees to explain what the process would be, the job analysis questionnaire, and all of that. The consultant came on site to do that. We provided every current employee with a copy of their the job description as it exists to date, their current description. We also took all the descriptions for any vacant positions and made sure that those got to the department. So those were distributed along with the with what we call a JAQ, or the job analysis questionnaire that helps that employees would use, or supervisors for vacant positions would use to reflect what their job duties are from their perspective. And what sort of qualifications we needed, what kind of experience, all of that to collect data. The consultants did interviews with all of the employees. Any employee that wanted an interview would have the opportunity to do that. Consultants reviewed all of those documents that were gathered. Supervisors and department heads had opportunities to also comment on that. Also, while some of that was going on, there was some preparing for benchmark data, gathering market data. So, as you may recall, the personnel board was involved in talking about the comparable communities and benchmark positions, and kind of talking about what the metrics would be used for GovHR and the scoring methodology. So, you know, that process happened August and September. We got to October, which is when the senior managers needed to get information back to the project team and GovHR with their input on the position. So gathering all of that data. So then let's see, again, I'm not going to go through every piece of this, but GovHR did start gathering market data. So that's been an ongoing process, is figuring out, you know, once we were identifying which benchmark positions would be out there, they were getting data on salary so that it can be applied to salary ranges at the right time. And we'll talk a little bit further later about when that gets applied and how it gets applied. Okay, but they have been gathering it, they've got it. They even have preliminary analysis of that, but there is a piece related to the grouping and classification of positions that has to happen in order to refine that. So let's see. Then just kind of going through in So ultimately, GovHR took all the information that they've gathered and did what they call a preliminary job analysis. They're outlining the factors that will go into classifying a position as score. We often talk about, that there's a system that uses a weighted scoring. Our current system does that, and the new system would do that. They're very different systems, same concepts, but they use different weights. So they went through and did a very preliminary level of that. But it's important that that it be applied in a way that works for the town, for the organization. So we can take this common method, but you have to take into consideration how many positions you have and how many, the nature of the positions to find the right breaks into grades. So so there's quite a lot of tweaking that goes on in there. And so once Dave gave us this preliminary look of the information that they had gathered, they turned it back over to the management team to say, look at this. Have we been capturing this correctly? Does this make sense? To follow up on missing data or things that they weren't clear on. And so we spent considerable time from around the beginning of December through into the beginning of January with meetings with the department heads to just keep talking about their positions and what we were seeing and calling that to the point that we could get information back to GovHR. Okay. And then it's been, then GovHR used that to start building what we call a classification system. And we often refer to the classification and compensation plan. So they ultimately come together, but there are two pieces. There's classifying positions, is grouping positions based on common factors and putting them into grades. Compensation is the actual salary range, minimum, maximum rates. So that's the part that I talk about that you can't fully apply until you've got all those groupings set. So that's been what's happening is this continuing massaging and finding out what kind of groupings would work for Concord, given the wide variety of types of positions we have. There were, once GovHR had a proposal for that, and we finished the meetings in December and early January, they met with senior managers to show what the next stage, like how they would actually group them based on all the work that we've been doing that period. And so, get us to where we are. Sorry, talking and reading at the same time, but I'm just giving these back. So that happened on February 7th. And so, with that, well, there's some preliminary thoughts of what salary ranges might look like. Those aren't final. We're not at the point that those could be established. It was to start seeing what that could feel like and get the senior management team's reaction to that. When you put it all together, they were seeing things more from their individual department. Now when we put it town-wide. So we are right now completing a process that gathers that senior management team feedback. And giving that back to GovHR for them to consider to get a plan that the classification plan that would be the proposal and preliminary for everybody else to see and start commenting on. So so that's the stage we're at right now, is having the very final stages of a preliminary grouping. This is the key to how everything else falls into place, right? Everything comes after that. The other systems are waiting to be applied to it. So a communication went out to the employees this week to say, so save the date for next week. We talked about that there'd be a meeting on February 21 and GovHR will be on site. Unfortunately, our consultant had an injury this week, and so we don't think that we could proceed with her in person next week. So we've been talking about just kind of flipping the schedule a little bit with looking at the approach in a way that can still get the results, but still strive for an in-person meeting, because we think that would be better for everybody for to be here. And so while the, this original draft was talking about having the meeting and then giving out to employees the, their proposed title and grouping within a classification plan. What we're proposing now is that we flip it and postpone that meeting for a week. And in hopes that we can have it come in person and instead send out preliminary written communications that would allow people to still view it this week and then have the meeting the following week to hear when we can get and to ask questions. So that's what we are working on right now with this new information, and it's part of the puzzle that we need to talk about today and how this all comes together given these factors. The consultant is available to still work with you guys on the presentation, and we can
On the 21st.
yeah,
Okay.
and even perhaps a little bit before as well, if you have availability, we can work on that because she wasn't going to be available, but everything's flipping around, so happy to talk with you about that to make sure that how you want to proceed on for the presentation for the 27th. So so in this outline, I'm going to go more line by line at this point. This one was done before I learned of the change that we were just talking about. So instead of having the 21st meetings, I think we'd be looking at, we're looking at March 3rd, is that the Wednesday? So, and instead sending out written information next week. Then there would be a review period for employees where there's a form that GovHR uses. It's a standard, it's a request for reconsideration. So again, right now we're looking at groupings, classification that doesn't have the pay range attached to it.
The Wednesday, March 1st is a Wednesday.
Oh, okay.
The third is a Friday.
Sorry, thank you. So Wednesday, March 1st is what we're kind of targeting right now. But that's not confirmed, right? So this is all just new news and unfolding. And so then there could be those meetings, and there could be a review period, a 2-week review period is what we have in mind for employees to look at those groupings, say, I don't know why I would be grouped with this position, or I think that if I look at this relatively, this doesn't make sense, or the title doesn't make sense. So really focusing on that part. Employees would have an opportunity to fill out this request for reconsideration form. GovHR would look at that. We'd have time with managers to also get their input, and then we'd have GovHR recommendations. So at the same time that goes out to employees, we were thinking that we can also put that on the web page. So we think we could have a place for residents to be going to where they can see the materials. We need to mark that it's preliminary, but it's out there at that point, and everybody's looking to comment on it. This is the groupings again, though, so it's not the full part. And then at the time of the public hearing, the review process would still be going on. We can talk more about what you would want to do at the hearing, what people's expectations are, and all that. But at least an update on the process, what the articles are all about, how more information would be coming, that sort of thing, and options for continuing to get information to the public. And that's what we had talked about with the moderator back in, it was on the schedule in December, the possibility, and you can still put this in the warrant and you continue to post things and give updates and provide the information to the public as you have it. Then So it would be clear that there's still a review period. HR would then need to make recommendations back of whether they think that there should be changes to where a position is grouped. And once that is set, that's where salary ranges can be applied, right? Because, so now to talk about why. So when you build a compensation plan and apply it to the classification ranges, it's a balance of looking at market factors and competitiveness combined with the internal equity. And that's what this system is all about. We don't have salary data on every single position. That's just not a way that you would approach it. You take the benchmark positions. And so we have quite a lot of salary data ready to apply. But you have to know what grades they're going to be in order to then have the formulas that make that salary range so that you're combining the market data for enough positions within a grade along with the internal equity, the grouping. And then you can see what it is like. The town manager would like to build that based on the standard that's been used in Concord for many years, which is building it off of the 85th percentile. And so that's saying that we're not going to be necessarily the top of all employers in pay, but it would be on usually it's not exact because you're doing nothing. But theoretically, they would have 15% that are higher. And so at this point, that's what the preliminary range is that would be presented for everybody to start looking at, would be built on. That doesn't mean that, again, that every position is paid at the 85th percentile or that any position's salary range is at the 85th percentile. Because we're grouping them together, again, for internal equity. For some positions, that range might be more competitive. For others, less, but it's built on this formula for that. So that's something I think a lot of people don't understand, that it all kind of is relative and it's got to work for an internal system that has a fair perspective to it while also going on the market data. So once we get to the point in early March, where mid-March, where salary ranges can start being applied. At that point, again, we could send those out to employees, they could do public postings. You can be talking about it at personnel meetings and talk about all the options of where you got it. You're going to see that I've slated in here tentatively weekly personnel board meetings as we get to that point. And you can determine whether you think that makes sense or what, but and I've gotten here what you might be doing at that stage, depending on all of these factors and how many meetings you're able to have. But this goes into putting those ranges out there and having some comment period on that. And we have to talk about what sort of a period that would be and what that means when we're getting down to the ranges. But clearly the personnel board needs to look at that and see what they, whether that makes sense the way that the consultant is proposing to apply the ranges when you put it all together. And then we get comment from others. So then we could, instead of kind of go line for line, but I don't think I can say that. Let's see. So in this, we're up to March 27th. And at this point, we put in some things here about the select board's last opportunity to vote recommendations for the FinCom report. So there are a few documents and things that happen along the way through the process. So right now, we've got the warrant, and as you know, the warrant doesn't have the schedules that might ultimately be proposed. Instead, there's that placeholder that's described in the intent that we worked with the moderator and council on. Public hearing is an opportunity to provide as much information as possible to help the voters feel informed so they can come to town meeting and know the topics. In an ideal world, we would have more information by public hearing instead of, I think we talked about before, like a dress rehearsal for it, but again, the plan with the moderator was provide as much as possible and tell them how they're going to receive more information. Then there's a point where there's the finance committee does a report. It's their report, and they would put warrant articles in there and descriptions of the articles or their comments on it. And often they would put in the finance committee report whether the select board what has a recommendation regarding the article and whether the finance committee has a recommendation. So they might say the select board recommends a plan of action, that sort of thing. That's often listed in there. But it doesn't have to be in the report. That's one opportunity. The select board could also decide before, like another point, if their last meeting before town meeting, or whether they are recommending support, or they can decide at town meeting. And of course, we don't want to put people in a position where they're making last minute decisions. I'm just outlining that there are several opportunities along there that have been discussed earlier on, depending on the feedback. So when in March, when with those point where you could be discussing the proposed salary ranges, you can be considering employee and public comments and salary ranges that would have come through the request for reconsideration, anything that's been said at public hearing, anything that was received from citizens, otherwise either at a board meeting or through other types of communication. And you can, you have several opportunities to decide whether you're at a point where you might be printing something in the finance committee report, which is the ideal and what we want to achieve. That's the best thing. Have you got something that's close enough that it could be printed with salary schedules so that the voters can see what it is that is being recommended. Amendments can still be made at town meeting through a motion if there were smaller tweaks, whether it be a title or a maybe you want to adapt a salary, but there are opportunities to make amendments via motions. But the intent at that point would be to have again good representation of what the voters are being asked to consider.
Amy, I just want to confirm that April 5th is the date that FinCom has to submit the report to the printer.
We've got in here the deadline for when we need to give it to them. So it might be that it goes to the printer that date, but they would need it before then, I think, in order to get it ready. So March 31st is the date that I was given for that.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's okay. It's a lot. They're trying to tackle the best way to walk us through this. But again, this. So where I'm at right now in March is again tentatively, maybe having weekly meetings or whatever you feel is needed at the point. But the activities would be allowing several opportunities to be discussing the entire proposed plan in there, and getting to the point where the personnel board can determine what you want to submit for that finance committee report. I
think what we can maybe some kind of questions
Yeah.
that you get deep track.
Okay.
And I'm going to ask the first one, which is, and I know there's no quantitative data, but if the town were to postpone for some period of time,
Mhm.
future town meeting, this particular classification compensation issue, what are from in your eyes, and knowing the town, knowing the employees that you do, what are the pros and cons of doing it? If we don't do it, or we do it, what can you give us your thoughts on that?
Mhm. Well, we don't want to have something that isn't vetted enough and that people aren't comfortable with. That's very dangerous. And so I recognize that and everything that I say. And so if people are saying we just aren't there, then we need to be sure we know then what are we going to do. By not having something now, I do think it would be critical to determine what else, what are the steps to bring it forward as soon as possible afterwards. As you know, there have been many changes in the town. In a short period of time, there's been lots of restructuring and changes, and you know that we want to capture that. And there have been a lot of changes in the labor market. Okay, and it is very important for employees to know that their positions have been looked at. In some cases, they have. In other cases, things develop over time, and maybe something has changed in their job that just wasn't captured. And so it is important that they know that that has been looked at and considered, and that there is a reasonable system for knowing what their compensation is. I think that employees will be very disappointed and upset. And if this isn't going forward, they're looking for that. We have employees that think that the ranges aren't competitive. We'll see if that's what it says. Initial information is that there might be some positions like that, but what Joanne has said to me is generally, in general sense, she sees that we are paying around the 85th percentile. That's her impression at this point, but that's not going to be true of every position. So as we talked about, we're not surveying every position, and people need to be able to understand what's happening with their position and why the town has made those decisions that they are to have that range. So if this can't go forward through the town meeting process, I think it's very, very important to consider what are the options for bringing it forward through other means rather than waiting to run the year.
That answers. Nancy?
So I have a couple of things. Number one, I do feel like a couple of things that it's really it's an overwhelming process. I mean, in all the work that you have to do, and it's just huge to try to put all this together. And I do think that it would be very upsetting and really make employees really angry and upset if it wasn't done. But I think it will make them even angrier and more upset if it's done and done forward and done quickly to get it through. You want to be able to say that we have done the best that we could possibly do with the information that we have. We feel really confident about this. So if that's the case and we can't put it through, then there are other options. There is a special town meeting. I know that costs a fair amount of money, but I feel like that would give extra time to make it the best that it possibly can be, and then move it forward with a special time meeting. That I think is definitely an option, but I do feel hurrying and trying to put stuff in and not do the best job that we know we can do would be worse for everybody. So.
Did you have another point, or is that
No,
okay. Liz, would you like to share your thoughts?
I agree with both your comments stated so far. I think it's really unfortunate that it's not ready for town meeting. Because I do think employees are eager to see things, and that was the objective for this project. But it's not ready. And I think that just as you say, if we put something forward that we haven't seen any details at all, we can't stand in front of that and behind that as a personal board.
We really only have a couple of months. There's a huge amount of material.
Let's see if anyone else, is Terry? Well, I'll open it up for comments from citizens at this point. Anyone have any comments to share?
Is Paul has hand raised? I can't. Paul, go.
No.
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 Okay. All right, well, then I think we'll move on.
And can I just ask, I agree completely that it can't be rushed or not approved. But is that the conclusion, that this is not doable? Like you just said, it's not something that you can do with this timeline or have a town meeting. Is that what I just heard?
Well, no, I'm sorry. I just feel like that we have a certain amount of time, and I just don't know if we'll be able to do the best job we possibly can do in that length of time. So certainly, I would assume we're going to go forward with as much information as we have. We anticipate that's exactly that we're going to complete it and do the best job. But if it doesn't happen, rather than going forward with something that isn't right the way we want it. Yeah. Right.
Okay, is that, Liz, what you were saying as well? I think I thought I heard you saying that it wasn't, that it's just not going to go to.
I don't know what it tells them if I dial in from my phone. What is it? This phone? It just
Melissa, I can mute you. I'm just gonna.
I defer to Bill to summarize.
Well, yeah, we still have to hear from the town manager. But I think as we look at the landscape today, I think there's a greater chance of this not being done correctly than it is to be done correctly. And because I'm making a judgment call here in a qualitative way, that we have to be extremely cautious, and that moving forward, I think could be too risky. Could be too risky. And risky as it represents how the employees feel about it, how the citizens feel about it, how we as a personal board. We haven't unfortunately been able to complete this in a way that would exemplify that we have our act together, that the personnel board is really attempting to set the bar high, but set the bar correctly so that all constituents can feel that they have been heard and that they feel that they may not like the result necessarily, but that we as a personal board, at least I think, have a duty to sort of say, we're not really sure that this looks very good at this point. Now, obviously looking very good now on the 15th of February could be different. But, Liz is going to be making a presentation to the select in a rather short period of time. I would think that we as a board and citizens would expect to have something that's more concrete. And to leave it to hoping we can piecemeal this together after the February 27th meeting, when we really want to have 4 weeks. It just seems, awfully optimistic. So this has nothing at all to do with the fact that this doesn't, this is all related to the time. So obviously, if we could have got started earlier, then we would have had more time. But we didn't. And therefore, we have to live with what we have. And that's, life is full of those kind of moments. So that's, I don't know if I've answered your question specifically, but I guess the bottom line is, I think we're concerned.
Right.
That this may not be appropriate for the personnel board to recommend going to town meeting.
I understand that. I think then it would be helpful to understand what steps the study needs to go forward.
Absolutely.
Right? So we're not saying not to do that. So kind of what are there different decision points? Is this a decision not to move forward, or are you going to continue to make decisions as you go along? Understanding, I hear that this very well may be something that you feel you can't move forward. I hear that.
Well, I think Nancy raised the point about alternatives. Special town meeting being one. There may be others, and there may not. But if there are other possibilities, then we should understand what they are and what are the pros and cons as it relates to those.
Yeah.
I have no clue. So that would need to come from town manager or from the attorney or whatever. It seems to me that there has to be some other mechanism, but that may come with certain financial issues or come with time issues, or I don't know, but I think we should at least explore what those other alternatives might be, including a special town meeting, which I don't know. My gut feel is I don't want to have a special town meeting for this.
Right.
But maybe I could be convinced otherwise. So I think we have to know what our alternatives are if we don't go forward and recommend this for this next town meeting. Once we know what the alternatives are and we decide, hopefully we can pick one, then I think the timeline would need to be refreshed. Now I'm going to assume that what you had up there, sort of like a Gantt chart, that you covered all of the activities. I'm not sure you did, I'm not sure you didn't, but it needs to be refreshed.
Right.
And it needs to be refreshed with new dates. The objective has got to be that not only the citizens, not only the employees, not only the select board, the town manager, the personnel, we all have to feel like we've done what's really is a necessary class, a grade A job, grade A plus, whatever, that reflects, the values of the town, reflects our own personal values, and it recognizes that the employees of the town of Concord are vitally important for what we have as a citizen to offer to us. And so that's going over this.
Either way, we would continue to work on this project.
Yes,
We
absolutely.
wouldn't stop working on
No.
it, but who knows, maybe something might really happen and we may.
I think the problem is we don't have a crystal ball.
Right.
We don't-
Could I add one other thing about the crystal ball is, I'm sure WHR has data with all of the clients they've worked with across the nation. As she described it, Joellen described it, they must have a sense of how long these projects take on average, and it would be great to understand that. So are we waiting is it usually a year, so August to August, so we understand what is the normal time frame for this kind of work and where are we in that time frame? And that will help us to understand what other options. If it's, I assume that a special town meeting is too expensive for this kind of thing. So I'm not thinking that that's the way forward, but if it's a year, if it's 18 months for these projects usually, do we would just wait till 2024 town meeting? I don't know that we have a sense yet, and I'm sure that, you know, HR has that kind of information, they can share with us, and I'm happy to bring that up in the meeting with Joanne as well, so that we can get that kind of assessment from the consultant. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I just have one question. What if for some reason we are going along and things start to pull together, but it comes after April 5th or whatever? But in the long run, we might be able to do our good job on April 24th. Would there ever be a chance of being able to get into town meeting? I'm just,
So there are several chances to get into town meeting that may or may not get you the support that you want or the buy-in that you want. So, you know, there's, what they say, like the last year that I don't think that people would be comfortable with it is to make a motion at town meeting with a town meeting handout, right? That's it. But what are people seeing before that? What opportunities have they had to comment on it? How are they feeling about it? There's a lot that would have to come before that. But yeah, what we're trying to outline there were some of the different decision points and options that you may say it's just not there. We need to stop here with the town meeting process, not stop with the study. I think that's a very big difference, and decide on a different path. And we have been talking about, I followed you, Bill, on what you're seeing about the concerns. And we have been, you know, saying, okay, what would be the alternatives? And we can certainly explore that with you. There's been a few things kicked around, and that's not with the thought that it can't go forward, but with the right, but we need to have an understanding either way, right? So whether it be a special town meeting, whether it was the or some other kind of public hearing or a continuation of a public hearing, rescheduling. So that one possibility that was thrown out there was that could the select board continue the hearing of the 27th so that more information could be presented a little bit further down, and then there could be assessment whether that's enough. So I don't have all of that right now, but I understand that is something that needs to be explored with the board, and bring some others to know the process and the options in to
Right, I mean, that information is important to the select board, important to the town manager, and important obviously to the personnel. Right. To know, to have that data in order to decide what to do. Any other thoughts or comments at this particular point?
no.
Is anything coming out? Okay. Well, the next item on the agenda was preparation for the 27th public hearing. And I guess where we're at with that particular item is that Liz will be meeting with Joellen prior to the 27th to, I guess, come up with a script or with a plan as to what you will be presenting at that time. I don't necessarily have any particular thought in mind as to help. I mean, I certainly, if I was here, I would sort of like to, I would typically probably use sort of a, what is this and why is this and how we're doing this, and sort of trying to simplify some of the verbiage is somewhat minimal, but you know, PowerPoint presentation was but why, how, you know, that's a nice kind of, so, but there's a fair amount of narrative that I would not put into a PowerPoint presentation, but Liz has done many, probably more presentations than I have, so she will figure it out. she'll figure it out, and I have total
Yeah,
confidence in.
yeah, and last year I presented you to do on that, and the PowerPoint was excellent, and I really didn't get, because it was different, not the same and stuff, but it was well done and very, not a lot of questions. Because you were there too, which made a difference too. Are you gonna be there?
Yes, and Joellen also will be available
Right.
to.
So that will be great. Yeah.
All right,
Sorry, just one last thing to type in there. So the other two articles will also, it's the public hearing to say, here are the articles from the personnel board, right? So I would assume to start with the two articles and then say a short blurb on, this is delayed and will continue the process, but it's not going to make it into town meeting this year, if that's indeed the final.
Yeah.
if that's the decision,
Yeah.
Okay.
if that's the decision, right?
Well, you'll show, the first one would be ratification of the ones we already did, going forward to 23, which is.
Yes, pretty straightforward, right?
And you can think if I'm wrong, but sort of a cut and paste from
Yeah,
presentation last year, so it's.
Yeah,
Yeah,
So that's, and then I guess the one that is sort of new, obviously, is it's Article 6. What is that all about? And how does that get? That would be another talking points for this.
and I would. Yeah. 5 is the new one, they're talking about what's happening in the study and what would be proposed, and then what is that other article all about? There is a description in the warrant about what that's about, but there still needs to be some bullet points. Which I think is more like some of it is more like a standard presentation than ready for that.
And Nancy, when you did this last year, it was 5 minutes, is that it, or?
very short, because you're gonna go first, it looks like the payments. As it articles 5, 6, 7, 9, 4, 5, 6. And then people will be followed, so it wasn't a lot of time.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean,
Right, I mean, they may want to spend more time on
They may.
Article 5, and there may be more questions, so that is helpful to find out is what is the time to get the guidance back. And as I was checking out with you, but I wouldn't ask whether you already seen, there are recordings that are online of the previous public hearings, and you could actually watch those, so you know, looking at it, but I'm happy to gather the links for you.
Okay, great, thanks.
All right, I think we've covered the necessary points for this meeting. I don't think at this meeting we have to, because I think there's some open-ended questions, that need to be answered. But we will probably need at the next meeting to have our own what would we be needing to look at, needing to approve.
right,
If we, the brick building, are presented with this for approval, we should have our own internal checklist.
Yeah, that, exactly, you mentioned that last time, and that would be very helpful, to know as soon as we can, what sort of things are on your mind, and what you need to see, if you're comfortable with it, or what you think the public would need to see, that sort of thing.
Okay.
and this checklist that we're not.
That's a
have that, can you send that?
Yeah, I thought we might want talking with it today, and kind of great, but yeah, I'll send it. I'll do the revisions for the situation of the employee meeting that's happening with Joelle, and I'll read those updates and send that out to you as well. And then this will also be posted available.
And we need to catch up on the minutes, so that's, with everything else you've got going on, I know it's, but it would be helpful for me to be able to capture some of the points from, especially as it relates to the personnel board charge.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some potential thoughts on it that I'm going to talk with the video about too, how we might help. I would say you've got a lot.
I've got them all done except the last
Okay.
week, which is halfway done. So
Yeah.
all of December and January are with you already.
Yeah,
So
Um,
I don't know what else, what are your thoughts?
I was talking about going forward, but I wondered if, while you're working on this other, whether it's too much right now or not, I'm not saying that for that aspect of it, that's what that comment was about, whether you needed a different, while you're working on the public hearing or other things related to the class.
I'm almost done with last week's and this one I.
Okay, so that was just a question, that was what that comment was.
Okay.
And then, so yeah, when I received them and it, there are edits that need to be made in terms of capturing some of the detail. And it's when we're in the midst of this, and I'm getting the packet ready, I haven't,
So one of the things you mentioned, Amy, is that one of the, I think it was from December 21st, that they needed to have council review. And I don't know if that's proceeded or.
no, that was one related to the, that was before related to the employee hearing.
I don't think that one's been posted yet either, though.
Okay, all right, let me take a look. You voted on a few that I think maybe weren't posted. Is that the case, or is it not?
No, I think,
Yeah.
I think,
Okay,
I think we have not had the 1221 minutes.
yeah, okay,
And that was the point about either the attorney or whatever, and there needed to be some edits of the minutes.
okay.
Anyway,
I
that
didn't
needs
think
to
that
be
was the
worked out.
December one, okay. All right, let me take back the report back to you. It was a matter of the timing when it came in and related to the meeting and then whether or not, and that's not on you. I'm saying that that's when it came in, for me related to, and then it was out, but I'm not sure on that. So I'm not sure which one we're talking about at the moment.
Well, before the end of the year, I got all the minutes done from 2022,
Okay.
just so we were clear on, the finite at the end of the year. And December hasn't been posted. And also we haven't approved those, I think. And then there's January, we had 1 or 2 meetings in January, you have those minutes. And I think if we just put them up there as a draft, that's acceptable. But I just think that part of the reason I raised my hand to write the minutes was to make sure that they were put up in a timely manner.
Sure.
And I would really
Okay, yeah,
love to make sure that happens.
yeah,
It is a lot of effort. I mean, it does.
It is,
Especially now that we're getting the recordings, so we had some issues where you indicated that council would have to be involved. So I went carefully through each of the 2-hour meetings on the recording and double checked everything. So it's an inordinate amount of time not to have them presented to the town.
well, I hear you, and I apologize for that. It's been, a busy period of time, and as you know, I was out unexpectedly, but I'm not trying to make it, to make excuses for that. I will look back and see where they are, and I wasn't expecting this meeting either, so.
Yeah, well, I think it's good, we've got a point of having a level playing field here, and it's good to share these kind of thoughts, because obviously it all goes towards our own personal values as to being participating on a board in which we feel good about how all of the cogs and wheels are turning.
No, I do have one question. If you know how we at town meeting, we always present this as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the other piece to our presentation. That wouldn't be presented to the select board because we really don't have it. But it would be presented if we make it to town meeting. So all the new gov changes all across would be presented. So that's a lot of work, but they would be doing that with you anyways, so that's another thing to consider because they would be putting all the groupings and then all the class and all the comp.
Right, so the groupings are, like, all of that is in a draft form that is being finalized. We need to get the groupings from based on what employees have to say about their classification set so that the ranges can be applied, but all the data exists. And it's putting it all in together as that review process for the classification has been completed. Okay. Makes sense? Yeah.
All right, we, in time for some citizen comments, there happen to be any hands raised? There is.
I have one if there's a moment.
Sure, please.
Paul McCone. I understand. Seems like you're in a box. I don't know. There's a great way to get out of this box. My concern is that sometimes perception becomes reality. And if there's any perception, and I don't have an answer to this, it's just a comment, and I'd like to second Bill's comments about, this needs to be top shelf to the employees. And they have time to absorb it, speak amongst themselves. It just seems, whatever the circumstances are, that if this comes across as being a rush and not top shelf, I'm concerned that we could actually do more harm than good. So it's just Paul's comment on, after the last year, with the employees' perception. This, at least having this meeting, they can, if they even know about it, hopefully they're watching the agendas and this type of thing, might be helpful for the next series of meetings to have a timeline sent to the employees so that they're aware of what's happening on a meeting by meeting basis. So even if they can't attend it, for example, today they were still at work during this meeting, that they have an opportunity to go on YouTube, get it up on YouTube immediately so that they can watch what took place, so we don't get, could be a wrongful perception of rushing and making this not top shelf. So that's just an observation, folks. That's all.
Thanks, Paul. Thank you very much for that. Any other? Yes, Mark.
Coming forward, so I'm not just a voice in the middle of coming out of the back of the head. Thank you for your attention to this. In terms of preparation for the 27th, I would suggest a timeline similar to what Paul was talking about, which is simply a list of the major milestones. When will the preliminary classification be published? What is the expected comment period? When will that be finalized? What are the personnel board meetings to do that? I would suggest a dedicated link on the personnel board page, or even right on the board page, so that employees have a single place to go to see that, and the public does. It is an opportunity to simply tell the engaged public, meaning the public as well as the employees, that this is going on and what work is happening. And I do also encourage, being deliberate. I think one of the things that, if I were where you are now, would be a struggle for me, is that we don't know how comprehensive the changes are going to look. I mean, if the new compensation, classification plan looks a lot like the old classification plan, then probably the adoption and the comments are going to be soon. If it looks substantially different, then that's going to require more dialogue, more understanding. And right now, sitting here on the 15th of February, you don't really know what that's going to look like because you haven't seen it. And so I appreciate that you're taking the time to be deliberate and really make sure that you understand what that is. So that's my primary comment on that. I also was just going to mention for the minutes, one of the things that I did with the fiber task force is, it's a great thing to drop the link to the YouTube being recorded into the minutes when you count them. That way people who, sort of want to follow along or go back and grab that. I just checked while you were discussing it. There's 5 meetings in December that don't have minutes posted and no meetings in January, of which there are 4 more that have already, including this one that, or 2023 rather than the third. I also noticed in the schedule that Amy was presenting, and it would be great if that document was up. It's not part of the meeting materials that are available to see for anyone who's trying to follow along. So there was small type. Maybe an understanding of what the decision points are that the personnel board is going to be acting on in each of those meetings, because it seems like a weekly meeting cadence is a lot for you, and you should have an opportunity to know what new material are you going to be getting and what information. You do not need to review the entire history of the project at each meeting when you're moving at this pace. What you need is the new material and the decision that's going to be made based on the material. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin. Very helpful. We can learn a lot from each other in terms, especially those that have participated in some very fine task forces and programs. Boards. Thank you. Okay, any other hands up? I guess there's, so I'll entertain the motion to adjourn.
Well, I will definitely make motion that we adjourn this meeting at 4:08.
All right, thank you. Second,
I second.
and then all in favor,
Aye. Right.
and I. All right, thank you all. Thank you, Amy, for all of the